It's John Black, Super Chemist. We're going to look at this video by Hindsight. One word, Hindsight. You can see the name of the video.
Sweden's gang war has done a series of explosions linked to a gang war.
I want you to keep in mind and remember, Sweden is literally the number one, well, I don't know if it was number one, but it's considered, everyone thinks of Sweden as the number one country when it comes to no crime, just great people there. Oh, there's just no crime or nothing, man. That was when they were capitalist. Then they turned over and they wanted to be socialist. Let's see what their socialism brought them. Okay, let's see what their socialism brought.
Det här är en svår tid för Sverige. Jag kan inte nog understryka hur allvarligt läget är. Sverige har aldrig förr sett något liknande. Inget annat land i Europa ser.
No other country in Europe is seeing anything like this. They open their borders up, they give free money to everyone, they teach them to not work, they demonize the people that work, and they give more money to the people that don't work. They have open borders, and they wonder, they're confused. They're confused that now that they're socialist, they're confused why their country is going to crap. And why, when they weren't socialist and they were capitalist, that their country was succeeding in being the richest country in the world, actually. They're confused.
Något liknande.
Less than a decade ago, Sweden had one of the lowest levels of gun crime in Europe. Now, they're the second highest. In Stockholm, gun violence is roughly 30 times that of London. The country is engulfed in a gang war, which is almost entirely run by people with a migration background. Sweden's famed welfare state and its lax asylum laws has made it a popular destination for immigrants. Since the 2000s, they've had a steady high number of new arrivals. But in 2015, it peaked at over 160,000.
What's funny is, I don't understand. What do you think? No bad people? Why would? The question I have is, why? If I was a bad guy and I'm in a third world country and I see this open borders, I get money, I get free housing, get free this, free that. Why wouldn't I move? And there's no vetting. Why wouldn't I move into that country, that first world country? Why wouldn't I? Why do these people think that these? If you're a bad person to begin with, why did you? That's what I don't understand. If they're bad people, why do you think they have morals enough to say, oh, I'm not going to go over and take advantage of that first world country, even though they have open borders with no vetting? I have the morals to not do that. Okay, but I don't have enough morals to stop raping and murdering people in my third world country, but I have morals enough not to go over to this first world country and continue murdering, and it doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't they? I would. If I was that's what I would be the first thing I would do. I'd be like, free reign on first world people.
Of these non-Western immigrants, nearly half are unemployed. They're also 9 times more dependent on government welfare.
Gee, you give people free money not to work. Who would have thought? Maybe a bunch of people would be like, hey, I'm not going to work anymore. Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
They live predominantly in poor suburbs and are poorly integrated in Swedish society. This is where armed gangs recruit their members.
Explosions, shootings, gang crime that's risen to unprecedented levels.
This is the rise and fall of Sweden with hindsight.
Yeah, that's the fall, right?
It's worth mentioning that Sweden's gun crimes are still far below that of the United States. They have an average GDP per capita of $60,000, making them one of the richest countries on earth. Their life expectancy is 83 years, and they have some of the best healthcare and education in the entire world.
Keep in mind, this is when they were capitalist, okay? This ain't today. They're going to show you today.
Sweden ranks at the top of the charts in many respects. But when it comes to migration, how well immigrants integrate, and how productive they become in society, Sweden is doing very poorly.
See, they want equity. They're going to get equity. See, people think equity is, we're going to make all the third world countries into first world countries. No, equity is not that. Equity is when you take all the first world countries and you make them into third world countries. See, now everyone's equal. If everyone is a third world country, everyone's equal. That's what you asked for. You asked for equity, and the only way you're going to get equity is through everyone being poor, everyone being a third world country. You asked for it. You beg for equity. Now you've got your equity. You're just as equal as a third world country. See how you're equal now? You love it? You like it? Huh? You like your equity?
I'm going to dive into that topic, but first, it's important to shatter the biggest misconception about Sweden. They're often regarded as a social democratic utopia, some kind of third way between capitalism and socialism. And people believe that nations can achieve similar social outcomes by expanding their size of the government.
Because this is what kills me about like socialists, communists and that, you know what I mean? They're basically, because all it is make the government big and make the government in charge of everything. Distribution of all the stuff so everything is fair. That's how a socialist and communist, that's how they believe you do fairness, is by getting politicians in government, / government, to pick and do the sharing. You know what I mean? Like what? Like when I was young, you know what I mean? Really, up until I started watching the news and watching people, YouTube videos, I didn't know that people were total morons. I mean, I knew they were morons, but not this big of a morons. When did it come that the politicians are who we should trust on who divvies up I think that maybe those kind of people should have to take their pay and give their pay to the politician and let him divvy up that money to you back, okay? Yeah. Well, what kind of... That just shows what a nut job you are by saying that. That's the most double speak I've ever heard in my entire life. We need to trust the politicians to divvy stuff up. That way it's fair. That's how you do it. That's how you get fairness? You let the devil divvy up the stuff? Is that how you... Oh, okay, that's how fairness is, huh?
But that would be a misreading of history. Their famous welfare state that's taking such great care of the old, the sick, the unemployed, and a shocking high number of refugees is only a few decades old. Sweden became rich and successful before they adopted their comprehensive welfare system. In the 1870s, their economy was far below Northern and Western Europe, and their average GDP per capita was half that of Great Britain. 3/4 of their population lived off farming, which was an incredibly tough existence in this semi-Arctic environment. They developed a strong work ethic with an emphasis on hard work, individual responsibility, and family values. When the world began to industrialize, Sweden became the fastest growing economy in the world. Swedes were trustworthy, hardworking, and responsible. They remained neutral during both world wars and developed a much more moderate version of today's welfare state. Sweden's rise to prosperity was characterized by free market policies and limited state involvement. It wasn't until the 1960s that they underwent more drastic reforms to their welfare system.
Yeah, then they turned socialist. Oh my God. Who would have thought that socialism would have turned into... Who would have thought trusting the government and trusting the politicians to do stuff? The more money they spend, the more they embezzle. So, I mean, if you give them more stuff, they're going to embezzle even more. They're going to want more departments of the government because they can embezzle even more. It's like, go on.
The concept folkhem, meaning people's home, gained popularity. It describes Sweden as a family, with citizens being expected to take care of each other like siblings. This philosophy partly explains Sweden's embrace of refugees. Today, their welfare state provides citizens, native or immigrant, with incredible benefits.
Yeah, you got to be tolerant to everybody. See, this tolerance is so taught so much that you got to now you got to tolerate rapists and murderers. You know what I mean? Hey, if even just if one out of the 10 people coming into the country are rapists or murderers, it's okay. You got to let your children get raped and murdered. because 9 of them aren't rapists and murderers. So that if you if you think that you should protect your own children from rapists and murderers instead of helping total strangers from a third world country, 9 of them, to get in here and prosper, you know what I mean? You're a bad person if you care about your children being raped more than 9 total strangers from another country that aren't even, they just want a better job. That's what's funny. They're not fleeing because they're going to be killed or something. They just want a better job. You get that, right? You're putting your child over, you're letting your children get murdered and raped because you want total strangers from another third world country to have a better job. Okay, and so you're willing to let in 1 out of 10 of them be rapists and murderers. Yeah, that all makes sense. That checks out. That's not communism at all.
When a child is born or adopted, each parent is entitled to 240 days of parental leave. A married retired couple receives payments that almost equal their pre-retirement income.
Yeah, they want to teach. Once you got a socialist government, they want to teach the public, the masses, they want to teach their citizens, you don't have to work. We'll just give you money. As long as you let us to continue building the government bigger and bigger so we can embezzle more and more and more, then we will just give you some free stuff. You know, we'll pay you off a little bit. You know, we're going to destroy the country. That's okay. But we're going to pay you some money here when you retire. We're going to pay you this here and this, and we're going to pay you. And then that way we can embezzle our trillions. You only get pennies, though, compared to what we're embezzling. But we'll let the system keep going that way, because that all makes sense. That's going to last forever doing that, because money grows on trees.
Healthcare and education are mostly free and are amongst the best in the world. The state is very generous, but this needs to be financed through taxes. In 1950, the personal income tax was 21%. By 1995, it was raised to 52%. So how did all...
That was in 1995. Guaranteed you, I didn't look it up, but it's 75%. Can you imagine being in a country where you have to, the first 9 months you work, you give it all to the government, and then the last 3 months you actually get to keep your money. That's what they do. That's what they do in Switzerland right now, or Sweden. In the United States, it's bad enough. Like we work for 3 months and give it all to the government, and then we work for 9 months and get to keep the rest of it. Unless you're in a blue state, then you pretty much give up half your money. You work about 5 months, give up all your money, and then the next 7 months you keep your money if you live in a blue state. But yeah, that's what communism is. You give all your money to them, to the government, to your God. Basically, communism is basically a religion, man. And you replace God with the government. That's what it is.
All these changes affect the economy.
And that's just what the LGBT community is too. They worship God. I mean, they worship the government, and they worship the trans person. Anyone that joins the trans, because the trans people are the army, the autistic, the gays that don't want to admit they're gay, the depressed, and the fetish people, and then sprinkled in is a tiny bit of actual trans people.
This is their GDP growth. In this period, between 1968 and 1975, most drastic welfare reforms took place. They suffered quite a bit during the 80s, and again during the 90s. They were the 4th richest country in 1975, and the 14th in 1993. The employment rate hasn't improved that much. In 2014, it was only slightly higher than 3 decades earlier.
Keep in mind, I guarantee you, I didn't look into it, I don't know. I guarantee you, half of the people in freaking Sweden are employed by the government, doing nothing. They have no job, really. They just go to work and get paid like welfare, except they get paid a lot instead of like poor welfare people get paid nothing. I guarantee you, they're like, oh, the unemployment rate or the employment rate's about the same. Yeah, but over here, the employment rate, back in the day, yeah, the people employed, they were employed by actual businesses, not through taxes. Okay, because you're not really employed if you work for the government, because no one it's not like a business where I can finally pay back you first world people for all my troubles in life. You know what I mean? I